Welcome to the Enchanted Earth podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. So welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Gabrielle Anya Rafello, and let me tell you a little bit about Gabrielle. She helps those who are spiritually awakening to experience growth that feels safe, empowering, and real. She currently offers online training and one-to-one support through her Family of Light program and is a teacher and mentor specializing in spiritual growth and ascension. So welcome, Gabrielle.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we go back quite a few years, and I think we have learned from each other so very, very much. And I am just so excited to have you on our interview today. And I always like to ask my guests what their experience of nature was in childhood. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can talk a little bit about it. I have to be honest that my own experience of nature wasn't terribly strong when I was a child. It's something that really developed, perhaps in more recent years, that connection with nature. When I was a child, I was aware of beauty and what it felt like to be in a magical place, like a magical garden.
Can you say that over again?
No problem at all. So my connection really with nature started more recently, I would say, probably in my sort of 30s and 40s and my 50s. When I was a child, I certainly could appreciate. We'll start again. It's okay.
No, let's just go with it.
You're releasing, which is a good thing. Yeah, it started, I suppose, for me, really when I was in my 30s, that connection with nature, particularly when my own children were born. I really started to feel the magic that exists within nature. But as a child, for me, I suppose I have memories of being in my grandparents' garden, and the fact they used to love to grow fruit and vegetables, and it was always sunny when I was there. And I'm a real sunshiny girl. I love sunshine. I love light. And for me, their south-facing garden in North London was a picture because it was full of beautiful things they'd grown themselves. And so I suppose as a child, that would be my earliest memory of that sort of connection with nature, sort of like in this domestic garden. Certainly, I would have been taken to lots of places to appreciate nature, to various sort of larger gardens and parks that were open to the public. But whether I really could appreciate just the beauty and the kind of connection I naturally had with nature at that time, I don't know that I had a real awareness of that. When I was at school, I do remember, I've always loved art. And I do remember sitting in a meadow one day. We were asked to take some colouring pencils out, and I was asked to draw what I could see. And I remember crocuses, the little flowers, the first sort of flowers of spring really coming out in February, March here in England. And that probably is my earliest memory when I was at sort of that secondary school, high school, where I started to sit in the grass, sit on the ground myself, and felt this connection with this beautiful flower. That probably is what appealed to me at that sort of that age. And trees have always been very special to me. And I think probably around a similar time, in fact, in a similar place, probably when I was in high school, I had started to feel this connection with trees, like there would be some beautiful willow trees that would drape down towards a lovely stream near where, we used to have our classroom. And I remember feeling a sense of peace, I suppose, when I looked at those, or perhaps if I was drawing them, I would actually feel a sense of connection through the art. So those, I suppose, are my earliest memories of that kind of connection. In fact, to some extent, when my mum used to take me out and she would say, oh, we'll go out for a nice walk. There would be a lot of resistance there. I actually felt a little bit like it didn't feel as comfortable to be in wide open spaces for me when I was that age, when I was growing up. But when my own children came along, that's when the magic started to happen. And I started to appreciate what it was like to be outside and how different it felt being outside to feeling perhaps, how I would feel if I was indoors. And I tried as much as I could at that stage to get them out and about, and to take them to beautiful spaces, to take them on nature walks and introduce them to this wonderful world out there that really, has an amazing effect on how we feel.
I have a couple of questions, but also just I guess, a revelation that just came to me about, so many of us really weren't that connected to nature as children. And, we grew up in the 60s, 70s, and so on. And now we talk about nature deficit disorder as being kind of not really a new thing, but that children are becoming more and more disconnected. But I'm feeling a sense of hope because if you and I both had childhoods, and so many people I've had on this podcast are saying the same thing,
Okay.
that they grew up in an inner city, which I didn't, but I grew up in suburbs. Uh, and there is definitely a disconnect in the suburban kind of landscape. But I'm feeling a little hopeful that if we established this deeper connection later in our life, that that is something that is there, that is possible.
Absolutely. It's a possibility for anyone. And for me, it very much started to come in, as I said, with my own children and kind of experiencing the joy that they felt when they were outdoors and the fun they would have, even going into a woodland, where the leaves in the fall had started to sort of rest on the ground, and just that fun from, lifting all these piles of leaves up and playing a game in that way. Perhaps it was my childhood was quite serious. And actually, I think having my own children allowed me to start to really connect with my own inner child and to play again. So I suppose for me in my 30s, that's when really things started to feel much more light and playful. And I was experiencing things through their eyes as well. So yeah, my connection with nature really started, I suppose, in my 30s. Um, my connection with gardening as well came quite late too. And I always remember my mother saying to me, you don't enjoy gardening? I said, absolutely not. I really didn't enjoy it at all. But now, oh my gosh, you give me a day to be out in the garden and to just, immerse myself in my garden, in connecting with the land. I can't think of anything better. I just absolutely love it and can't get enough of it. But yes, for me, it definitely has come later in life. And I'm glad it has. It's changed my life. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious. So your grandparents had this beautiful garden in the north of London, and you recall that. So, I mean, do you have any like specific story of being in their garden and noticing it, or feeling that you got when they were in their garden that was different from other experiences?
It felt very stable. It felt very grounded as a space. Within their garden, they had several fruit trees growing. And I suppose glancing back, I remember the feeling of light there was always very strong because it was south facing. It had really the sunshine for the best part of the day. In fact, they had this beautiful conservatory that overlooked it as well, which would always bake. You would go in there, it had a certain smell about it. My grandmother was a great one for poking seeds into pots of compost, literally jam jars or little yogurt pots that she'd washed out. She would fill with soil and she was growing all sorts of things. She would literally poke a seed into each pot. And remarkably, things just grew for her very easily. But there was this real sense of light, color. They like very old-fashioned flowers, very traditional sort of English flowers. Um, And I think also there was this real sense of connection with their community there. They lived in a bungalow, and in fact, the fences, the hedges on each side were quite low. So they had a connection with their neighbours on each side. And there would be times where, they'd be in their garden, they would be talking to their neighbours. So there's all of this going on. And I think it felt quite different to what I was used to in my home environment. It's not to say those things weren't there, but maybe they just had more time to appreciate that kind of quality of life and taking things more slowly. I guess my earlier memories really would have been taken from the time when they retired. So they had more time for me. But everything felt very creative in that space. It felt very lovingly tended to and grown. And yes, it was the quality of light, I think. And these fruit trees, especially, they were so abundant in terms of the amount that they would yield, they would produce. And again, I suppose there was a certain sense of curiosity for me about that, because it was very different to the garden I had at home. And yes, they probably had time to invest in this magical space and then make it their own, I suppose. That was the sort of best part of the memory, really. It was very different and quite magical for all sorts of reasons. My other grandmother, so this was the grandparents of my mum. My other grandmother was very interested in elementals, funny enough. And when I used to go and stay with her, she would encourage me to go to the bottom of the garden with little cupcakes and leave them for the fairies. So that was an earlier memory as well. I remember her having a woodland behind her very narrow garden. She lived in a sort of semi-detached house, but it had a very long, narrow garden. And there was woodland at the back, but she didn't grow a huge amount. But I do remember this little ritual of going down to sort of meet with the fairies, which was quite fun, when I was younger.
Well, that's a pretty cool experience.
It certainly was, and one I've always remembered clearly.
Yeah. So, in your childlike imagination,
Yeah.
did you see any of these fairies?
I didn't at that time, but I have seen fairies. And I have visited beautiful gardens and places in nature where they have responded to that request to see them and to feel them and connect with them. So perhaps that was a seed she planted all those years ago that would kind of later turn into something that was a little bit more tangible. But yeah, certainly again, very memorable.
Oh, all right. So cool. I wish my grandparents had that connection for me. I certainly didn't get that in my upbringing from my parents or my grandparents. So that is just so cool. So, Gabrielle, do you have a story? I know you've got many, probably, but what kind of wants to be shared today or right now?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this before connecting with you on the call. Um, One of the memories I'd like to share was actually something that happened quite recently. In fact, it was this year. My partner and I were very fortunate to go to Sedona. And as many visitors to Sedona would obviously experience, we loved going and experiencing the vortex energies in different parts of the area. And there was one particular day we had good fortune to connect with a lady who was a shamanic healer. And we decided to ask her to take us on a guided um, journey experience for sort of half a day. So she very kindly agreed to meet us and took us to a few of the vortexes that perhaps we might not have come across on our own travels. And we went out walking. She brought with her a beautiful drum. So she had a native drum with her, and she used that to clear our energy. She also sort of performed some very gentle rituals as well in these very special sacred places that we visited. And the final part of our sort of experience with her was to actually visit this birthing cave. And in fact, it's believed it would have been used by the native people for many generations, it would be a place where women would traditionally journey to when they were about to give birth to a child. And it was a gentle walk. It was a beautiful walk, and it was only really the last sort of 10 minutes of this walk when we started to sort of climb up at quite an angle. And for me, I'm not a particularly strong hiker, I have to be honest. This was quite new, and I was out of my comfort zone. But we walked up to this birthing cave, and it became quite steep and quite rocky, and clambered over the rocks to get to the top there. And we sat inside, and it felt absolutely beautiful. And I just had a very strong awareness of my connection with this beautiful sacred space, and my own connection with the rocks and with the land and the terrain. And the whole morning was magical. It felt very, very beautiful. And what she impressed upon me and what I felt through the course of our time together was this very natural sense of connection that we all have with nature, so long as we haven't kind of closed it down, and sometimes we do close these things down. And she kind of invited me really to tune in to some of the sounds and the smells and sensations, throughout the course of that journey together that morning, in different places around Sedona. It was very, very special. And we were reading into, the cloud formations and the sunshine and the color, the plants and various things we could see, even down to like the little rocks that were in the shape of hearts. And it was just beautiful, very magical. And in the afternoon, she left us, and we had already arranged to go to a beautiful retreat. It's just outside of Sedona on the drive out. And we wanted to just go and visit this particular retreat to see if it might be a space we could perhaps visit if we were to return to Sedona. And when we got there, it was down a very, very long track. We had a hire car, and we were driving down this track, and it seemed to take a long time to reach this particular retreat space. And as we were driving down this track, the cloud was getting thicker and darker, and it was just feeling a little bit off somehow. The light that we'd experienced in the morning had kind of sort of disappeared. It just felt a bit heavy. And we drove down this long track, and eventually we reached this space. And when we arrived there, the energy felt okay. And I am, as you know, very, very sensitive to kind of my environment and sensitive to all sorts of things. We spoke to a lovely lady in the reception area, and she said, well, why don't you just take yourselves out for a stroll, get a feel for the place? They had a beautiful healing lake there, which we wanted to see. And we knew that there was a particularly strong vortex in this space, hence the reason for our visit. So we started walking out, and again, the energy didn't lift. It felt a little bit dark, a little bit heavy. And we reached this area where there was a beautiful waterfall near the lake. And consciously, I just spoke to Mother Nature, and I just said, show me you're here with me. Show me that we have this connection, and that I can connect with you at any time. You're always there. And I could feel that you're really real. And at that point, it literally was a second later, the sun literally broke through these two clouds, and it shone this incredible light down onto this area where we were standing in this waterfall. And the energy at that point was phenomenal. And I just was blown away by the strength of this and the response, how quickly it had been. I was very specific in what I wanted to happen. And I felt I created that moment, or I co-created that moment with nature. And I just stood there, and everything suddenly felt bright, magical. I could feel the elemental energy there. I could feel the word I'm getting is potency. There's this incredible strength in this piece of land. It was just remarkable. It was beautiful. And we strolled back. We went down the lake, which felt lovely. And in fact, there was there were two ducks swimming on this lake, as well as some koi carp as well, which were huge. But the ducks were funny because one was solid black, one was solid white, and I thought that's interesting, the two together. Um, and they were swimming along, and it's all very graceful and gentle, but something shifted, and it just felt like, I'd gone from a space that felt a little bit heavy and a bit dark to suddenly this light and brightness and connection. Um, and we went back in to see this lady, and she said, "How did you find it?" I said, "It was phenomenal." I really said to her, I really felt this depth of connection with nature. And I had a strong feeling that I'd been sent there to feel into this incredible vortex that exists within this space. And she said, I can feel that you really sensed, the true magnificence of this space. And then interestingly, I learned about the space afterwards because the man who actually took on the retreat has written many, many books about healing and about our connection with nature. And in fact, on reading one of his books specifically about this piece of land, it all kind of suddenly made sense that he also had this incredible connection with not only that particular vortex, but also just the strength that kind of comes from that incredible energy found in those sort of mountainous places, in the rocks. And for me, that was quite new. I've never really felt that depth of connection before. And as I say, it was literally only a few months ago, but it felt like it somehow opened me up to a
Wow.
whole new way of being and a sense of, okay, is this what you want me to hopefully recreate back here in my new home environment that, we'd only just moved into? It was almost like something was sitting there waiting to be, activated. And it was. It was.
Yes. That really surprises me, Gabrielle, because like you said, this is a really recent experience, a couple of
Yeah.
months.
Couple of months.
And you've always, I've always felt that you were deeply connected to the landscape. And to say that this experience like broke you open to another level, that's really significant.
It certainly was. And I felt what actually needed to happen there was my heart chakra needed to open as wide as it possibly could. Yes, I have had some incredible moments in nature. I think I've been very fortunate to live in some spaces that have been truly magical as well. In fact, when we first met many years ago, I was living in a beautiful area of land with a kind of 9-acre garden that was open to the public occasionally, just for them to experience the magic as well. It was a very beautiful space that sort of combined garden with woodland and meadow, which kind of is what we have now, which is amazing. But yeah, that connection, I don't think it's ever been quite so obvious. And certainly when I tuned in, I was told that I needed the experience to really return to a space deep within my heart. And that's what that place in Sedona really, I think, activated within me, is that deep connection within my heart. And in fact, the very next day was our very last day of our trip. And having had this experience with this amazing healer and then going to this retreat, I woke up the following day and we were kind of spending a bit of time in Sedona before driving back to the airport in Phoenix. And I felt absolute bliss. I've never felt it to that extent before. That sense of absolute joy and love and unity and connection. That really was incredible for me. I felt on such a high. It was wonderful. And yes, I've had experiences similar to that, perhaps not to that extent. Um, and everything I seemed to touch, I could feel the vibration in it. Every crystal I touched, every person I came into connection with, it was almost like I was seeing them in their light, in their pure light. It was remarkable. So something quite big had shifted in the course of that trip, but particularly towards the end when I had that experience with nature. And for me, I suppose I have been to some beautiful sort of mountainous places before, in Europe or even here in the UK. but there was nothing quite like the red rocks.
Mm.
Um, it kind of reminds me of something that did happen when I was, again, about 12 years old. I did visit the Grand Canyon and had a similar experience there. And in fact, I was told, and have been told many times, that I wasn't fully here in my physical body until that experience. So it could be, thinking about it now, it could be the reason why some of those memories of childhood aren't there as much as perhaps, they might be for other people. I think I fully came in when I was about 12 years old, and it was having visited again that part of the world, which is clearly a very sacred space, but particularly so, I think, for me.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. So I kind of understand what you mean fully coming into your body. Some
Yeah.
people listening to this might be like, what is she talking about? Can you just share a little bit about how
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
feel that experience? Yeah.
Well, at the time it happened, so when I was about 12 years old, I had this experience where um, it kind of manifested in the form of absolutely losing all strength in my legs, being able to stand up, being able to walk. And it literally happened overnight. And, when I went to see the GP and the doctor to try and understand what was going on, because I just lost all strength in my physical body. Um, they didn't really know what had happened. They kind of just said you've had growing pains and you've grown too quickly. But it actually ended up me having to take a few months out of school, and I wasn't able to carry on as normal. And it wasn't until a number of years ago, so I really started to wake up more spiritually, I suppose, in my early 30s. As I say, when my kind of children came along, that's when things started to happen. And um, I became more aware of energy and healing, and, started to show an interest in all those things that are holistic by nature. Um, and as a result of that, I had a few readings with different people, and they were all kind of coming back with the same thing and saying, well, you weren't fully here energetically until you were about 12 years old. Up until that point in time, there was some part of your energy that kind of chose to be held back, stay back at your point of origin, or within some other part of the universe. And having experienced a journey where I've become a healer and then an ascension teacher, and I've experienced lots of different healing modalities, through the course of those years of kind of learning and integration, I've come to understand the nature of kind of who we are. We're very much, I believe, having a beautiful experience as a spiritual being in a human body, not the other way around. It's our spiritual self actually is um, enjoying a continuous experience of life in different shapes or forms. Um, and I do believe that our energy can sometimes, be existing in many, many places at once. But, this kind of helped me to understand the nature of that experience when I was younger, and the fact that some parts of me wasn't completely here. And I fully incarnated in my sort of early teenage years when I was ready to. I think it was all part of the plan. I hope that kind of explains it in a little bit more depth.
Yeah. Yeah. I do so appreciate that. And just so many layers, so many interesting experiences that we have in our lives. And it just makes me think of so many shamanic people. And shamanic wisdom isn't just uh, from the Americas, right? There's shamanic
No,
wisdom all
absolutely.
over
Yeah.
this globe, ancient cultures, but
Mm.
so many shamanic people have had kind of an experience that
Mm,
you share of not being fully embodied
absolutely.
and or having a very physical strange illness
Mhm.
occur
Absolutely.
as children.
Yeah.
So,
Um, Funny enough, I'll share a quick um, story with something that happened on the day we moved into our new home. So on the 13th of February this year, we moved to our beautiful new space with land down here in Sussex. And just as we were driving down, we literally packed up everything. You know, the removal people had gone ahead. We were in the car, and I just kind of tuned into spirit and into energy and just said, okay, can you give me some signs? And, you know, be really curious to know why I'm going to Arizona, you know, in March. What's the purpose really? Is there a sort of a meaning behind it that I'd like to be perhaps more aware of? And within about, again, a few minutes, I had two vans kind of overtake us on the motorway. And the first one actually said Phoenix as a sign on the side of the van. And the second one said destiny. And I thought, wow, I'm definitely meant to return to this part of the world. So I'm very blessed to have a really strong connection with spirit. And for me, just that little confirmation as we were driving down towards our new home, you know, I just needed a bit of distraction. It was quite a interesting move. It had all gone smoothly, but you know, all moves come with a certain amount of stress, don't they? Um, and I think this holiday, you know, soon after we'd moved into this space, was a lovely opportunity for me to get in touch with my energy and what I was going to be needing for the next chapter in my life here in this beautiful sacred piece of land that we have become the guardians for. And, you know, there was no coincidence that we were meant to go to that part of the world again. It's very, very special.
yeah, yeah. So it's like we have these experiences when we're open, when we're asking,
Yeah.
when we're in the right energetic space to have them. There's so much to share about that. Um, but what I wanted to say is we have these kind of like portals that we walk through that bring us to another level of consciousness that we need to then live from. And it's following our life path and just watching where we're guided. And I just love that. You know, I know we saw you several days, just a few days after you moved in the UK when we were visiting London, and it was really wonderful to connect again. But I was just so curious, like, you just moved and now you're going on a trip to the US. I mean, like, crazy. But obviously, you have a deep resonance with that area of the world. As I do, there's Utah keeps bringing me back, Southern
Right.
Utah, and that region, but certainly Sedona, all of that. There's perhaps past life uh, connection, or it could just be the earth and the energy of the earth that is nourishing and feed us. It could be both. Who knows? Any myriad of reasons. But now I just want to ask you because I'm so curious. Can you share what you experienced in the Grand Canyon?
That was such a long time ago, my first experience when I was younger. I remember the one thing about that trip, I remember standing on one side of the Grand Canyon and looking across and seeing a thunderstorm in the distance. And to me, that felt really incredible that I was in sunshine and there was this huge cloud, and like um, a darker space above the, you know, the opposite kind of platform, the opposite rim, and just being able to see this incredible lightning come down into that part of the rocks. I think looking back, a number of my really strong memories of nature have been with the elements, particularly lightning. And the grandmother I talked about at the beginning when I was talking about the fairies in the garden. I remember once she said to me she'd actually been struck by lightning several times. Once she'd actually been thrown off a bicycle when she'd been cycling out by herself one day. Um, and I think the kind of the nature and the elements were really, really powerful for her as well. But it's, yeah, whenever I see There's one other memory I would love to share actually that definitely links into a similar kind of theme. So maybe this is the way Mother Nature really speaks to me when it needs my attention. Um, a number of years ago, when I was about sort of early 40s, I went to the Masai Mara in Kenya. And again, I know I've had kind of like past life experiences in that part of the world. And that for me was incredible to see, you know, the beautiful animals, the incredible landscape, and the feeling of connection to my own internal compass. That's kind of what I got from that trip. That was amazing. I was actually, you know, the first day that I kind of landed in Nairobi, we drove down to the Masai Mara, which takes about 8 hours on the road. Again, very red earth, similar to the red rocks, very strong color, red earth. And getting to our camp quite late in the evening, obviously well into darkness, but navigating by the stars. So the guy who was driving us was kind of navigating by the stars because there's no road signs in the Masai Mara. There's a lot of kind of very strong, you know, rocks and rugged terrain that you've got to follow to get where you need to be. And I remember thinking as we were driving in how incredible it was that he just knew his sense of direction. He just totally knew where he was driving to. Within about a week or 2 weeks, I was able to do the same. And that absolutely threw me that we all have this incredible internal guidance system. And I was able to kind of find my way around and feel comfortable with being in a space that perhaps was so unfamiliar to what we were used to, you know, in our day-to-day life. And there was one day we went out, went out most days on game drives. And one day we went out and had the most incredible experience. Again, it was to do with a thunderstorm. And there was this incredible rhino that we spotted, and we just sat and watched this rhino. And the space behind this rhino was the cloud was quite dark. The light was coming from behind us, and this rainbow literally made this arch above this rhino. And I still have a picture of that moment. It was phenomenal. On the outside of the rainbow, it was like grey, but within the rainbow, he was just framed in gold. It was just incredible. And to see him, not only to see such a rare creature out in the wild, but also framed by this incredible rainbow and this gold background was just phenomenal. So, yeah, I think I've had a lot of experiences like that where it's almost like nature has tried to show me through the elements, you know, its strength and its power. Briefly going back to, you know, the red rock energy, I have a theory that because it contains so much hematite and so much, you know, grounding crystal, the more grounded we are, the further we can expand and the further our awareness reaches. And I think when we're truly grounded in our human form and really, really strong and connected, that's when spirit really comes in and tries to show us something that's really, really quite magical and ethereal almost. So, you know, having that kind of strong mineral content in the rock, I think, is really supportive of these kind of spiritual experiences that we have in these kind of places.
That definitely is, it's part of the whole immersion
Yeah.
in that space. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And I so identify with lightning as well, Gabrielle. I didn't realize we had that connection,
Yeah.
but I had an experience at 11 with a lightning storm that was that stands out in my mind as one of the most, I guess, profound experiences of my childhood.
Yeah.
And then lightning came a few more times. I didn't get struck by it, but I almost don't feel afraid of it either, in a way. Um,
No.
but it's also come in dreams,
Okay.
and I do I and I am. gobsmacked, to take a British term,
Yeah.
at my amazing experience at the Grand Canyon was also watching a thunderstorm across the rim.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was on the North Rim, and we were at night just watching
Yeah.
these amazing thunderstorms and lightning on the South Rim, and it was really magical.
Mm,
Wow.
beautiful.
And there's such a metaphor of your experience of not being grounded with your legs when you came back home. It was almost like your body was
Mm,
the land back in the UK was alien to you. You
mm,
couldn't get grounded.
mm, mm.
Wow.
Absolutely. Very, very, um, I suppose looking at it through a different lens and realizing years later that it was almost like an initiation for me at that age. And I tend to feel that around age 12 is quite a common time for us to have like an initiation or a rite of passage. And
Hmm.
that for me was definitely, I believe, my commitment to being here and to doing the work I do, and kind of this year, just before we went to Sedona, I had just launched a new program called Family of Light, because I felt that this is the area that I wanted to be working in, not only working sort of with the land and creating a beautiful space here, but also helping people with their own ascension journey. And it was almost as if that trip and that magical space really prepared me to begin to offer this. It's like a brand new chapter for me, really. So it was well timed, to put it that way. I think it just came at the perfect time. And I just sometimes love that feeling as well, that we just need to put our trust into certain things, and particularly Mother Nature, to realize that actually we're so well cared for. We have everything that we need from nature. Um, it provides, living on this planet provides us with everything we could possibly need in terms of light and food and water, and, the resources that we need to have. And um, yeah, it's a lovely now and again just to have moments where you just have nothing to do but surrender to that. The fact that, actually everything is taken care of. We can just let go and trust. And everything comes in at the right time as well, like those kind of experiences. Um,
And, no matter how much work we do, our inner work and feeling the connection, we do need to be reminded
mm, we
uh,
do.
every once in a while of the
Definitely.
tremendous majesty and the co-creative relationship that we have. And, just going back to that Sedona experience where things just didn't feel like quite right, but then you just asked for that
Mm,
connection and a sign, and
mm,
boom, you got it.
yeah.
And we need to recognize that sometimes we just have to ask.
Absolutely. Yes. We have to remember to ask. It's such an important part of our journey. Otherwise, we go around in circles, and we kind of, just letting it go and putting it out there and saying, okay, show me. And that's what we can do. I think with Mother Nature, with spirit, all of it, we can say, okay, show me. I'd like to see it for myself. I'd like to see evidence that you're listening and feeling and understanding me. And yeah, I'd like a sign, please. And yeah, I've always been given those signs, which is a very wonderful thing. I feel very blessed that those signs have always been there.
Yeah, and going from here to here,
Absolutely.
we have to be open and vulnerable
Yeah,
to experience in order to
yeah,
observe and see those signs, those messages back to us.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Oh, Gabrielle, I know I feel that there's going to be another talk in the future with us, because I know from knowing you, we could talk probably about 10 hours about
Yeah.
these amazing stories. Um, so I would just like to wrap up. Is there any last words you'd like to share of our connection to nature and the divine source?
Absolutely. When we first connected with this property that we're living in now and the piece of land that it sits upon, that was a very interesting time for me. So it happened very quickly. We had been looking for a space, but waiting for a buyer for our previous home before we could really take any action. And it happened very quickly when it did come. So we received an offer on our previous home, and within a week decided, right, we know roughly where we're going to start looking. And actually, within the first day, this was presented to us. This one of three homes that the other two didn't really come with any piece of land to some, in terms of size. They were like small gardens. But we came to this one, and it was the third one out of the three on that day. And I always remember something that you said to me many years ago, we feel like a home chooses us, not the other way round. I've always believed that. And I tend to, when I speak to other people about um, land and feng shui and all the kind of interesting things we have in common, I often say, yeah, but the space chooses you. And that evening, we left this space. We saw it in, again, beautiful light. It happened to be a very sunny October day, late afternoon, and just the way the sun was shining through the meadow and the field was incredible. And we got home. And throughout the course of that evening and night and the next day, the space would not leave us alone. And it was almost, really speaking quite loudly and clearly. I really want you to come and look after us here, please. Look after this space here because, it felt this resonance with us. And we were fortunate to have the offer accepted and things started to proceed. And there would be times, literally, through the course of really only 3 months that it took to, you know, move the purchase forward before we moved in February, where the space kept speaking to me in a kind of way. It really connected with that heart energy that you've just described. Um, and it feels to me like a really creative space, a space where I can really hopefully bring some of my projects to fruition, that I can really feel safely held and grounded here, but also have that tremendous ability to reach out and expand my energy. So my spiritual awareness is supported. Um, but it kind of almost proved to me over the course of those 3 or 4 months how much it wanted us here and how much it wanted it to go back to being a space that was very natural and quite sacred, fertile, yeah, creative. And it wants to shine, this space. It wants to be a place of healing as well. So it could feel the resonance between what it has here with us. And it was almost kind of kept the energy and the consciousness of it. I believe everything has consciousness, particularly land. And this space itself just wanted to really show us that we were making the right decision to commit to it. And I have to say, we are truly happy here. It's very beautiful. It's got a lovely feeling. And even when visitors come, they kind of leave feeling just a little bit better and brighter and, more whole, regardless of whether they come here for anything that's formal or perhaps just a casual cup of tea. But it's a lovely space for them to come to where change happens. And I feel the change. Yeah, it's a tangible thing. They kind of feel different as a result of connecting here. They have that same experience that I had over the course of those few months. So yeah, that's the space that I wanted to really be part of, and I'm blessed to have now.
Well, I'm sure they're also reacting to connecting with you as well.
Thank you.
It sounds like you resonate so well in that
Yeah,
space. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And we're ready. That's it. You've got to be ready for these things sometimes, haven't you? And it feels like the time is right, definitely.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I look forward to seeing all that you create from this heart-centered space and, all the people that are so blessed to be able to work with you, Gabrielle. I know I have in the past, and you're truly a beautiful, divine soul. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for welcoming me in. It's been lovely. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I want to turn my attention to the listeners. If this is something that you resonate with, please share it with another. And we would love to hear comments. We will reply. So just give a comment below and subscribe if this was something that you'd be interested in learning more about, other people's experiences. So thank you, everybody. And I look forward to connecting again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.